The impossible living parallels the journey through Lent that has already begun. And impossible thinking will parallel the Easter period and time. The word impossible might seem like an odd word to use, particularly sometimes for those of us in the progressive fold. However, as we journey along, I hope that the word captures some of what we need to engage with and hopefully makes sense. Next sentence, I just looked and thought, oh, that's an interesting one. So personally, I don't think miracles in the traditional sense happen for me, but I do believe that strange things happen. And really a miracle is something simply when the impossible becomes possible. So I don't have a lot of answers today. I have more questions, and hopefully in our discussion we can go there. I think a lot of what I'm saying today will be familiar to most of us, but what I'm hoping at a minimum is that what I kind of share in our discussions will be a call to a kind of courageous living in the midst of the challenges we are facing around the world. So I'm going to talk about a political challenge, one that will be familiar to us, a climate challenge, and then in some ways a progressive Christian challenge, or a challenge to us as progressive Christians in terms of how we might respond to what is happening. So, impossible living. When we look around the world at the moment, there appears to be a big shift taking place. The world order set up in 1945 seems to be rearranging. Politically, the post-World War II order that we have lived in seems to be unraveling fast, as can be seen in the way the United States, for example, is currently conducting its international affairs. Now, I'm not suggesting that the world was rosy from 1945 until today, and that the world order didn't benefit certain people at the expense of others. I think it's pretty obvious that it did. But it does feel, at least to me, that on multiple levels, politically, socially, culturally, and ecologically, that we are on some kind of precipice or challenge. That's my sense of it. And a decade ago, things might have felt slightly different. Has anybody read the book by Yuval Harari? The Sapiens was the first book. What was the second one? Homo Deus, I think it was, which is about AI. And then Nexus, I think, is the third one. And when I read that book, it was quite an optimistic outlook on what was happening at the time, in some sense. So these are some of the things that Harari said when he looked around the world that we could be optimistic about or hopeful. He said that despite popular perception, global violence and war have significantly declined over time. That was just about 10 years ago. Compared to past century, large-scale conflicts have become rarer, and deaths from violence have dropped relative to population size. People, when he was writing, were more likely to take their own lives than to lose it in conflict, which was the first time in a long time in recorded history. We live in a very different world today. Advances in medicine and disease control. We've seen a massive decrease in pandemics. Harari also noted that for the first time in history, more people die from overeating than starvation, arguing that medical and agricultural advances have reshaped human survival. He also highlighted that we've seen massive economic development and many people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. Sadly, I think the events of the last few years have pushed against these trends that he suggested were taking place. So recent global events have significantly impacted poverty reduction. The World Bank reports that wars, debt crises, climate challenges, and COVID-19 pandemic have hindered progress, making the UN goal to eradicate extreme poverty by 2030 unattainable, in their own language. As of 2024, nearly 700 million people live on less than $2.15 a day, with global poverty rates stalling since 2019. The 2023 Global Hunger Index indicates that progress against hunger has largely stagnated since 2015, with severe hunger affecting more people due to multiplying crises. Young people, especially women, are disproportionately impacted, facing higher rates of extreme poverty and food insecurity. It is also fair to say that we're probably seeing a rise of right-wing political and extremism that we haven't seen for a long time globally. And you can all pick your countries, I don't know, Argentina, US, Austria, Netherlands, Germany, Hungary. There's just some that come to my mind. You can go on and on. The United States is one of the obvious examples of what, in terms of what's happening at the moment, where civil liberties are being wound back and freedoms being taken away, LGBTQI rights in that space, immigrants, people of color. But of course, that won't happen in Australia. Sometimes, and maybe it's fair, there's a criticism that we focus too much on what has happened in the United States, and with the assumption that what happens there is not going to impact us. I think we all realize that what happens in a globalized world has direct bearing on us. We've seen that with pandemics, obviously, as an example. When America gets sick, we all catch a cold, whether it's economically or in other ways. In the same way that what happened in Rome impacts what happened in the empire. And I would say that Australia is in not too dissimilar, geez, too many double negatives there, I think, to the States in some of its cultural and sociological shifts too, in ways that we might not be aware of. So the Joe Rogan Show, anybody heard of the Joe Rogan Show? A few people. Enormously popular in the US. It has become one of the most listened to podcasts in Australia. I think it hit #1 around election time on Spotify here. And it's a podcast that regularly peddles in numerous conspiracy theories. And it often peddles, MAGA ideas from the States. And it's actually finding fertile soil here in Australia. So just prior to the election of Trump, an essential poll came out, suggested there might be rising sympathy within the Australian population for some of the key components of the Trump worldview. So you could vote, I think, in this poll. So although Kamala Harris had a narrow lead in the essential poll regarding who Australians would vote for if they could, so it was 41 to 33, 60% still felt globalization had gone too far. 59% believe government is corrupt and taken over by vested interests. 59% felt illegal immigrants should be deported. And 59% believe there was a deep state of unelected officials with too much control. Perhaps an outlier poll. We have an election coming up in Australia, and it looks like, as of today, that Peter Dutton stands a good chance of winning. Now, I appreciate we will have different views on politics, and I should have said at the beginning, I'm speaking in my own capacity here. Hartwell is a community that's incredibly diverse and has many different views. So this is not Hartwell's position, probably obvious, but it's probably just worth stating. So yeah, I'm sorry you have to hear my view today. So I've heard that Peter Dutton is a decent human being, and I have no reason to doubt that. From what I've heard in terms of his personal life and the way he moves in the world. However, I think his political views are pretty indecent. So the question that I think we would want to wrestle with around our tables at some point later is, do we as progressive Christians want to support someone who has the following views? In 2018, Peter Dutton claimed that the residents of Melbourne were afraid to go out to restaurants due to African gang violence, a statement that was widely criticized as an exaggeration and for stigmatizing the African community. In 2016, he unfairly targeted a specific community by suggesting that the Fraser government's decision to accept Lebanese Muslim immigrants in 1970s was a mistake. 2018, with the clear racial overtones, Peter Dutton proposed offering fast-track visas to white South African farmers facing violence, describing them as persecuted and needing help from a civilized country. More recently, in 2024, he opposed granting visas to individuals fleeing the Gaza conflict. In terms of his parliamentary voting record, it's even more interesting. He consistently voted against legislation to establish a federal anti-corruption commission. He opposed procedural motions related to the introduction and its debate even. He's voted against federal action on public housing, opposed measures aimed at increasing housing affordability and support. And despite expressing concern over cost of living issues, Dutton has been criticised for voting against various legislation measures designed to provide financial relief to Australians. He has also consistently voted against same-sex marriage legislation, reflecting his long-standing opposition. During 2017 Australian Marriage Law Postal Survey, Dutton voted no. Dutton has also been a prominent opponent of the Indigenous voice to Parliament, arguing that it would re-racialise our nation and create division. Following the failure of the voice referendum, Dutton indicated that Australians would not want another referendum on Indigenous recognition for some time, walking back earlier comments to a second vote. June 2024, Dutton indicated that the coalition might abandon Australians' legislated 2030 emissions reduction target of a 43% decrease from 2005 levels. I'm almost there. He stated that he would not address the nation behind an Indigenous flag if he was Prime Minister, claiming it creates unnecessary division. In 2008, and this is the last one, he as a Member of Parliament chose to boycott the national apology to the stolen generations delivered by Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. So I think, and people might disagree, but I think if Jesus was to vote in the next election, he would not vote for somebody who holds the above views. PCNV's progressive values suggest a life of compassion and justice, about cooperative communities, diversity of sexuality and gender, the connectedness of all of life and creation. I'm not sure how Peter Dutton's views can be squared with progressive values, the prophetic tradition of the Hebrew Bible, and Jesus' dream for the world articulated in the Gospels. We've probably all heard the saying, the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. Have you ever heard that? I'm not sure about that. I think we're living in times where that moral arc is actually bending back on us. And we're heading to a situation where our moral quests for justice and compassion in some ways are even becoming moot with our current climate emergency that we are undergoing. We could be embracing a future where there are no humans at all that exist, and questions of morality might become irrelevant, for us human beings at least. More recently, a friend of mine, who many of you know, Matt Cutler. Anybody know Matt Cutler? A few people. Put me on to Brian McLaren's recent book called Life After Doom. It's certainly worth reading. McLaren suggests that we are on the cusp of getting to a point of no return ecologically, or actually that we might already be surpassing that point, or have surpassed that point. So before talking about McLaren's prognosis, I just want to remind ourselves of the current climate situation. As of March 2025, that's now, the global average temperature has risen approximately 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That surpasses the threshold set by the Paris Agreement, marking a significant milestone in global warming. 2024 is confirmed as the warmest year on record, with global temperatures about 1.55 Celsius, as I said, above pre-industrial levels. 2023 was the previous record for the warmest year as well. So this rapid increase in global temperatures underscores the urgency of addressing climate change. Surpassing the 1.5 threshold has already intensified climate disasters, wildfires, floods, amongst many other things. So I think these developments highlight a critical need for immediate and effective action to try and mitigate further catastrophes. Yet, Australia's views on climate are going in the wrong direction, according to me. So, just 60% of Australians accept that the climate disruption is human-caused, a fall of 6 percentage points from the previous poll just 18 months earlier. Christians are significantly lower than the general population figures just noted in believing in human-driven climate change. According to 2016, I appreciate it's a little bit old, research on Australian Christians, it focuses particularly on Pentecostal and evangelical communities. It says it appears to be Pentecostalism in particular where skepticism about the causes of climate change is most prevalent, end of quote. Other research has suggested that people belonging to faiths with a more literal view of religious texts, again, Pentecostals and evangelicals in this case, were more likely to doubt the need to intervene and to act on climate change. Yet, the overwhelming majority of reputable scientists agree that human activities, especially burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes, are the primary drivers of climate change and its negative impacts. Multiple studies found that over 97% of climate scientists who actively publish in peer-reviewed journals support the conclusion that human-caused anthropogenic climate change is real and poses serious risks. We've seen that in rising global temperatures, more frequent extreme weather events, rising sea levels, ocean acidification, and loss of biodiversity and ecosystems. While there are always debates around specific models, policies, and mitigation strategies, the core scientific consensus is strong. Human activity is driving climate change in ways that are both harmful to the environment and society. McLaren's book, he mentions 4 likely outcomes, and none of them are particularly nice. Collapse avoidance, a scenario where proactive measures prevent social collapse. Collapse rebirth is a second one, a scenario involving a decline followed by the emergence of new and reimagined systems. Collapse survival is the third one, a scenario where remnants of society endure under challenging conditions. And then, of course, fourth one, which is collapse extinction, a scenario leading to the near or total extinction of human and animal life. So McLaren believes that the collapse avoidance scenario is probably past us, in his view, particularly with the rise of economic equality and political and religious extremism and corruption, which makes it really hard to address some of these challenges. The truth is, and this is a truth, is that we are now in what's called ecological overshoot. So this can be defined as the point where humanity's consumption of the planet's resources surpasses the Earth's capacity to regenerate those resources, and we can no longer absorb the resulting waste. It's ecological overshoot. So, I haven't painted a very fantastic picture for us around the political environment we're facing, and neither the ecological one. So the question for us as Christians and human beings, I would say, progressive Christians, or how do we live impossibly in the midst of these scenarios as those who are influenced by the Christian wisdom tradition and who want to define themselves as progressive Christians? How do we want to respond to some of these challenges? To be honest, my own view is that the word Christian has become pretty hard to use these days. For me, if somebody asks me if I'm a Christian, I want to instinctively say no. That's my natural reaction, or start apologizing. I start fumbling around, not very articulate. I find it easier to say that I'm a spiritual person who goes to a progressive church. I also never just say church anymore. I even find the word minister challenging, but there's something about putting the word progressive onto church that does a lot of heavy lifting for me in many areas of my life still. So I find those words challenging. However, as my friend Meryl Blair, you're wondering what I'm about to say, she still talks about being followers of the way. Followers of the way. We know it was at Antioch that the Christians were first called Christians. Before that, they were called followers of the way. I really like that. I think following the way, though, demands certain things of us. At Lent, we choose to give up certain things in our lives. And so the question that's coming to me, and I wonder whether it resonates for others, is in the light of our current political situation we're facing in Australia, we can keep it personal, but around the world, and our climate crisis, what are we willing to give up to address those issues? Not just for Lent, but for the rest of our lives. What are we willing to do and give up to mitigate some of the ecological, political, economic, and social crises for all our creatures, all the creatures of the world, not just human beings? There is no Jesus coming on a white horse to save us. There's no white horse. The cavalry are not coming, but Calvary has and still can. On Calvary, we see an ultimate commitment and giving up for a more just and compassionate world, a commitment to God's dream for the world displayed in a giving up and a building towards. We are now the cavalry. We are. We need to get on our horses, not on our war horses, but the donkey that Jesus entered Jerusalem in on. The French sociologist Althusser spoke about creating zones of resistance. So what if, as individuals and the church, as we are part of, we create zones of resistance where we choose an impossible form of living against the cultural trends that we're seeing? Impossible living suggests that as progressive Christians, we can choose to live as signposts of the kingdom. And I think you know what I mean by that, dropping the G out of there. The kingdom. We can do this by doing our best to adopt the vision articulated by Jesus and the prophets in the Hebrew Bible. So these are just 4 things that I'm being challenged with, and you can sit with it as well if you want to, or take it wherever you need to in your discussions. But the first challenge that I'm living with at the moment, and I'll make this about us, not just about me. Do we really believe that our money is not our own as individuals? Do we believe our money is not our own? Can we believe that we steward our money for the greater good of the planet? Or perhaps that's impossible. 2, voting against Peter Dutton, but still being respectful to him as a human being. Can we do that and campaign against him? Discourse has become difficult, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't speak out. Can we seek not to get Peter Dutton elected? Or is that impossible? How curious, this third one I put there. I kind of don't want to say it. Anyway, I must then. Because this maybe hurts us a little bit more. Maybe, not more, sorry, that's the wrong word. Maybe it's a challenge, maybe it's not. Let's see where it lands. Can we give up eating meat every day? Okay, thanks. Moving on.
That's the easiest thing for you all to do.
Yeah.
I guess God's put it in the bin, though, right?
Oh, well, yeah, if it's in the bin, that's all right. But, so outside of ethics, and I appreciate that this is a complicated topic for many of us, so I just want to name that. But outside of ethics and health, our meat industry is a significant driver of human-caused climate change. Estimates vary, but studies generally attribute around 14 to 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions due to livestock production. Can we reduce our meat intake, or is that impossible? And then fourthly, can we seek to encourage the churches that we are part of? The churches that we are part of, that big buildings generally do nothing and are no good unless they are for specific purposes that are useful. Rather, can we free up our resources for our local communities? Can we give back to the indigenous people whose land it was stolen from? Can we create social housing with our resources for those that need it? Or is that impossible? James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. Our global civilization as structured is unstable and unsustainable. We use too much of the Earth's resources to replenish and produce too much waste to detoxify. Economically, we're in challenging times. More money and power goes to those who have too much already. Politically, there's growing social unrest, rising conflict, and democratic systems are being strained towards breaking point in many places. The current system, and I'm going to land with this, I'm pretty sure, the current system that many of us live in might make it very difficult to live impossibly in the world that we find ourselves in. Hartmut Rosa, who's a German sociologist, suggests that we are living in a time of social acceleration where it is very difficult, almost impossible, to get ourselves out of the systems of power and control that have got us into our current predicament. He suggests, though, that we should try, but that central to what is needed is a spirituality to underpin these efforts. In order to marshal our progressive Christian resources, we need to be resourced. And a resource is a return to source. So for me, this is my view again, I think that we need a deep contemplative spiritual resourcing from our spiritual and religious traditions to help us to live impossibly. I would argue that wherever a progressive response is, that it cannot be confined to our heads or even just to our actions. It must include a deeper spiritual return to the source and our spiritual and religious practices to help us become the kinds of people needed for the future. And in my second talk in a month's time, Impossible Thinking, I want to talk a little bit around those kinds of things. So my challenge today, though, is a call towards impossible living, a giving up so that future generations might not suffer because of our decisions. It's a call to arms, but not the arms of tanks and missiles, but the arms and legs of the divine life that seeks to live differently so that others can simply live. So what I'd love for us to do in our tables and online is to break up into groups, and we're all adults here, so we can let the conversation go where it needs to. But there is something that my other friend Andy, and I've had you in my mind a lot as I've prepared this, Andy, whenever we have discussions around things that we want to do or plan, or we've got ideas or concept, and the first thing Andy will say to us is, okay, so what are you willing to give up to make that happen? And I was like, oh, come on, we were just talking about it, man. What are you doing? But at least that could be a potential focus point. What are you willing to give up to address some of these challenges that we are facing? And then maybe a second question you want to wrestle with on your table: in what way can our spiritual, religious, progressive values and resources inspire us and resource us for those challenges? So I think what we'll do, we'll spend about 30 minutes, and the guys online, I believe, are going to break up into groups as well. That might just take a while to figure out. If you're not at a table, you might want to pull around a few chairs or find a table where there's not many people around, and then we'll close in about 30 minutes. All right, everybody, if you can just start winding up your conversations. The online guys will be back in about 33 seconds. Sack me? Yeah, cool. Thanks for the notice, and thanks for doing it publicly, Chair of the Board. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Credit card machine would be better, but yeah. Remember, your money's not your own, so I'm happy to make. I'm happy to make it mine. So I'll leave it. All right. So I think all the online guys are coming back. There's a pretty cool galaxy behind. I can't read the name. One of the online folks. Yeah, very, very cool. And there's like an arch there somewhere too. Oh, Robert always has that background. Well, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, they can hear us. Yeah, they can hear us. Oh, sorry. Yes, they can't hear you as much, but they can hear me. All right. So, cheers, Meryl. Just before we close, I want to take another leaf out of my friend Andy's book. And for the guys online, you'll be able to do this too. If you could name one word, just one word around how you're feeling after today, the talk as well as the conversation, what word would that be? And again, to state the obvious, we come from a tradition that has no issues with lament. So if we all end up with words that are pretty difficult, that's okay. Yeah, well, you don't have to say the word. We'll just pause. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about what that word might be. And those in the room, if you could just name that word out at the end, it'll be a form of prayer. And online, if you want to pop it in the chat box, that would be a good thing to do. What are you feeling right now after today's conversation? And what would it be? So in the room, feel free to name that. And I'll repeat online as well, just for the guys. Challenged. Connected. Connected. Perplexed.
Struggling.
What? Too many words. Sorry. Possible.
Struggling.
Trapped.
Struggling.
Trapped.
Unsettled. Energized. Now, I don't think I can see the ones online.
Fearful.
The chat box.
Fearful.
These are our prayers. These are our prayers. Thank you for coming, everybody. Nice to meet new faces and to have you in this space. Whatever churches you are from, go back in peace, love, and hope. If you're looking for a church to connect into, Hartwell is a beautiful space. I didn't go to church for 10 years before I came here, so it's been an incredibly life-giving space for me as I work through my progressive values and faith as well. So feel free to do that. We'll meet again in a month's time. I forget the exact date. Do we have 27th? We'll be back here, and I'll do that session, Impossible Thinking, and again there'll be 2 other sessions at the back end of the year. So invite those that weren't here. Lovely seeing so many people online. Thank you for putting aside the time, and we'll see you all in a month's time. Peace.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Where's the money, Bob?